The Drake Group Education Fund is dedicated to educating the public and professionals in our business with fact-based information featuring the experts in our profession, so that we might all do a better job of helping college athletes realize the promise of an educational degree and becoming all they can be as students and athletes. So we welcome you to our 53rd webinar. Thanks to all of our panelists for their time, expertise, and ideas, and thank you to all of you attending. We're excited to have a great group of collegiate athletes here today. Our webinars provide us with the opportunity to share new ideas, recalibrate our thinking on issues, and get up to date on important topics. We are so pleased to have you join us. Lastly, before you meet our moderator and panelists, I just want to emphasize that our speakers are expressing their own opinions and not the opinions of the institutions in which they might be students, unless they make that distinction in their remarks. Now, I'm honored to introduce the moderator of today's program. Please meet Leigh Ernst Friestedt, an attorney practicing specifically in Title IX litigation at the moment. And I will pass it over to you. It's all yours, Leigh.
Great. Thanks so much, Julie. And thank you for having us here today. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently representing 9 male and female student athletes who have objected to the House settlement, some of them based on the past damages, some of them now on the injunctive relief. By way of brief introduction, we have Brooke Baker, who unfortunately was not able to join us. She is at practice today at Vanderbilt University. She's actually a 6-year student. She did get her extra year of eligibility, which is extraordinarily impressive in this environment, and is one of their top midfielders, so is at practice with less than a month before they head into their season. By way of background, Brooke is a Division I women's lacrosse player at Vanderbilt, where she is pursuing a Master of Legal Studies in the law school. She also holds a Master of Science in Marketing and a Master of Education from Vanderbilt, and is a national champion at all AAC student athlete. So it's unfortunate Brooke's not here today. She is one of my clients, so to the extent anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to assist with that. I'd next like to introduce Lexi Drum. Lexi is a former Division I women's soccer player and team captain at the College of Charleston. She earned a Bachelor's of Science in Administration, graduating as valedictorian of the Honors College and receiving multiple conference academic honors. She is currently a first-year law student at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. So Lexi, thank you for joining us today. And full disclosure, Lexi has class in 30 minutes. So we have Lexi for 30 minutes. If anybody has any questions for Lexi, please feel free to push those through early. And full disclosure, I do not represent Lexi. Lexi is represented by another great attorney, John Clune, who is also working on the House settlement. Next, I'd like to introduce Scott Iannacone. Scott was a Division I swimmer at California Polytechnic State University, where he studies computer engineering. In his final season, he was placed in the top 5 in the 100-yard backstroke at the 2025 Big West Conference Championships and recorded one of the 5 fastest times in Cal Poly history. He also earned placement on the spring quarter Dean's List in 2025. Scott, welcome. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Gracelyn Laudermilich, is a freshman, Division I track and field and cross-country athlete from Rome, Pennsylvania. Since January 2025, she has served as a formal objector to the House versus NCAA settlement agreement and is currently a pro se appellant before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Welcome, Gracelyn. By way of background, too, Gracelyn is super extraordinarily impressive. She is representing herself pro se, which basically means that Gracelyn does not have an attorney. I've had the pleasure of meeting Gracelyn for the first time out in California when we presented in front of Judge Wilkin, and that was in April. But Gracelyn really exemplifies what it means to be a student athlete and what it means to have a student athlete voice. And before we start today, I also wanted to just commend all of the student athletes who have objected through this process and certainly the ones who have continued on to appeal. I think one of the hallmarks of this class action lawsuit is that it's supposed to be about the student athletes and their well-being. And that's a voice that I think we've been lacking through this process. And I'm really privileged to have these three individuals with us today. By way of brief background on the lawsuit before we jump in with Lexi, the House settlement is actually an antitrust lawsuit. And basically what it was is that the NCAA rules, which were restricting the student athletes from compensating on their name, image, and likeness, were deemed to be anti-competitive. So really, it's an antitrust lawsuit, and it had been litigated for years. In fact, it's a consolidation of multiple antitrust lawsuits. And so the past damages comprise of all male and female Division I athletes for the last 10 years. The injunctive relief, it comprises of all male and female Division I athletes for the next 10 years. So as you can see, this is hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of student athletes who are impacted by this decision. And it's really transforming the landscape of college sports. Again, just to bifurcate, the past damages actually has been settled at an amount of $2.6 billion. And one of the challenges that I know Graceland and my clients were concerned about, and why they originally objected and now have appealed, is that that settlement was negotiated without factoring in Title IX of the 1972 Educational Amendments Act. For those of you who don't know what Title IX is, this is a federal anti-discrimination civil rights statute that has been in place since 1972. So it's been there for 50 years. And basically what it says is that men and women in the context of education are supposed to receive an equal opportunity. So one of the concerns that our clients had expressed is that in a world where Title IX applied, you would not have been able to calculate a damages calculation where $2.4 billion was allocated to male athletes and only $102 million to female athletes. And that breaks down to 96% to men, 4% to women. Conversely, on the front part of this settlement, the injunctive relief, which has already gone into effect right now, and a lot of you may have heard about all these football players getting multi-million-dollar packages, that is part of the injunctive relief, and that is part of the new NCAA landscape where the college athletes can get compensated. The issue is that these schools are supposed to be capped at $20.5 million in terms of directly paying the student athletes. And again, what we're finding is in terms of that allocation of money, we are seeing a very similar breakdown in terms of the amount of money getting allocated to the male athletes versus the female athletes. Conservatively, it's over 90% to men and less than 10% to women. So with that as a high-level background to this, I'm going to turn this over to Lexi at this point. And Lexi, I know that you've been really involved in this, so feel free to help us understand how you got involved in this case and your background in Title IX.
Yeah, thank you, Leigh. So I'm Lexi. I'm Lexi Drum. I graduated last year, and I competed at the College of Charleston, which is in South Carolina. And how I first got involved with all of this is, I think growing up, a student athlete, I think throughout middle school and high school, I never really faced any inequities, and I never really saw a difference between how my male counterparts were treated across teams. And I got to college, and that's kind of the pinnacle of most female athletes' career. I mean, when growing up, I would say I wanted to be a professional soccer player, and a women's professional soccer league didn't even exist. So I think getting to college was my goal, my dream. And so I think getting there, I quickly realized the inequities that are present in college. There was teams that were commuting to their games on a private jet, while meanwhile other ones had to drive themselves in vans, and they'd be the same distance away. And so it's so clearly in your face, what schools and the NCAA are signaling. And I was like, there's just no way like this can be allowed, like what's going on. And you're met with like the certain answer of like, you should just be happy you're here. You should be happy that you're competing. And a lot of athletes, specifically non-revenue athletes, fall victim to that mindset. And it took me interning a whole summer and like learning the law of Title IX, looking at the research, looking at cases to understand actually what Title IX is. It's talked about all the time in college, like, oh, Title IX, Title IX. Yeah, every athlete can recognize that language, but they actually don't know what it is. And so I spent the whole summer researching and, there's the EADA reports of every single school. I empower you all to like look up your alma mater or look at whatever school you competed at. You can see the roster numbers for each one. And one look at those numbers, you can clearly see that it's inequitable opportunities. Specifically with the University of Alabama, if you want to look on the women's basketball roster, they count male practice players as actual female athletes going towards that count for their school. So if we want to talk about like empowering female athletes, how are we counting a male practice player who is not a student athlete, who is not training the same amount, who does not have the same requirements that an actual female athlete does? So I think that that in itself was just really eye-opening, knowing that there's supposed to be this protection of Title IX that we have. And as athletes, as student athletes, it's talked about all the time. Like the title of a student athlete carries so much value in it because everyone knows amount of work and time management you have to have, and just the amount of effort that has to be expended of being a student athlete, that student athletes shouldn't be the ones that having to research Title IX law and make sure that their school is adhering to it and advocating for themselves. There's barely limited time in the day to complete all your just homework and your assignments for classes. I know that's how I felt, especially with school. And so I think it came down to the House settlement provided an opportunity to really talk about Title IX, what's going on in schools. And that's ultimately why I opted to join in and object. And I mean, it's very clear. You can see with the past damages, 96% going to men, 4% to women. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. And I think at this point, it's going to take a change of mindset and a change of signaling because the people in positions of power, like the NCAA, like schools, are putting value on the teams that are profitable, and that is only going to further hurt non-revenue sports and ultimately potentially have them completely go away within college athletics as we know it. And for me, I didn't go to a Power Five school. I went to a mid-major, and I had the best opportunity with like my coaches and my team. And like I would not be the person that I am today without college sports, without being an athlete. And we shouldn't be limiting those opportunities to only a select few of sports that happen to be more profitable than others.
Lexi, that's so helpful. Thank you. Let's just step back a little bit because you said a lot of important things in there. Why don't you talk about your summer working with Nancy Hogshead at Champion Women? And I know you mentioned EADA, like help people understand Equity in Athletics Disclosure Act, what that is.
Yeah, so it was passed as a way to actually have clarity on like what schools were doing. So you can go on the report, you can see the operating expenses, how much they're spending on salaries of coaches. Those numbers are there. They're public information. Anybody can look at them. And I think what's even more troubling is that these numbers are public data and public information, and there's just no like mass like objections or upset to this, and it's honestly not known. So I also wrote a thesis in undergrad, and it talked about just knowledge about Title IX, and I surveyed Division I female athletes within the state of South Carolina, and overwhelmingly the results were the student athletes didn't know the Title IX protections they had. They didn't know, like they just recognized the name Title IX, but actually did not know like the actual like law and like protections behind it. So I think that having the EADA is a perfect, example of like that information is public data, and we need to be able to utilize that and hold schools accountable moving forward.
Yeah, great. And I think in terms of now you're at Northwestern Law School, congratulations, outstanding school. And again, if you didn't hear, Lexi literally graduated #1 in her class academically. So I think one of the things that we talk about is the importance of being a student athlete. And for many of the people here today, and for many of the athletes out there who may be losing their opportunities to participate, obviously the importance of being a student at these universities takes on a much more pronounced impact. But talk to us a little bit, Lexi, about your decision to go to law school and kind of what you're thinking about doing from here.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that getting involved in a lot of, I've always been interested in sports law, and I think that having the opportunity to really just look into what Title IX is, how it protects, all athletes at the collegiate level, and also how it leads to future impacts past the collegiate level. So when you provide more opportunities for female athletes at a collegiate level, it's only going to help the professional level as well. I mean, we can all look at, the Caitlin Clark effect and like the blow up of the WNBA and how that's now exploded too. And so I really want to dedicate my career into going to the sports industry, specifically having a focus on the improvement and continuation of women's sports.
Awesome. And I think as you think about Title IX, let's try to simplify this for everybody. Again, how would you best explain it to somebody?
Yeah, so I think that this is one of the biggest misconceptions of it being, okay, everything's divided 50-50, and that's actually not how Title IX articulates things. So it's based on the student body population. So my school was 60%, the regular student body demographic was 60% female, 40% male. Our athletic department in our school is supposed to replicate that. So we should be 60% female, 40% male for athletes. So that's what I did during the summer is I would look at EADA reports. I would look at the student body, see the split of just the regular student body and see, okay, how many, female students are there? How many male students are there? And then I would cross compare that to how the athletic department was built up. Very clearly, you can see that a lot of schools do not follow this. And that is while it's not dispositive of a clear Title IX violation, it is very telling that it's very likely that there is a Title IX violation. So that's kind of how everything should be split up. So 60% of funding should have gone to like the women's side. 60% of scholarship money should have gone to the women's side. And now these rules are kind of changing because of the House settlement with unlimited scholarships. But when I was there, that was the case of Title IX.
Great. And in terms of your EADA research, what did you find in terms of the percentage of universities that are currently in compliance with Title IX or reverse not in compliance, whatever's easiest for you?
I think it was 3% that might be in compliance. And a lot of those schools were smaller, like Division III schools, institutions. But yeah, nearly no one in the Division I level especially is compliant.
Yeah. And then one component too of the House settlement too is, I don't know, the Title IX release, Lexi, is I think something that's unique. I think you're probably pretty well versed there. Do you want to help people understand about the Title IX release and how this is impacting all of the female athletes right now?
Yeah, so it basically the way that it was articulating is that you're not going to lose your Title IX claims if you Leigh can remind me if you opt out, you're not going to lose your Title IX claims, correct?
Yes. The only way that a woman could preserve her Title IX claims based on the release and the House settlement is if she affirmatively opted out by January 31st, which meant that that you wrote a letter to Judge Wilkin affirmatively saying, I want to opt out. That would be the only way to preserve your Title IX rights. And one of the things that I discuss with my female clients is, whether we wanted to go that path or whether we wanted to object to the point that we thought that the Title IX release should not have been in there. And that's actually the avenue that my clients ended up taking. I don't know if that was part of your thought process too, Lexi, but feel free to elaborate.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I think overall the whole process of opting in and opting out was very difficult for no reason. Half the emails that like athletes got were going to their spam, not even seeing it. And by the time the athletes were even aware about the House settlement, the like expiration to opt in or opt out had passed, and they weren't really knowledgeable about what it even meant to opt in and opt out. It took parsing through court documents upon court documents upon court documents to actually understand what this whole settlement was all about, because schools were not educating us about this. I was the one that was educating my teammates about this. And I only knew, because of my internship with Nancy Hogshead and talking with Leigh and the connections that I've made. And so I was kind of a rarity of like actually knowing what was going on. But the general, student athlete consensus was no one really knew. And all they heard was, oh, I'm getting money. That sounds great. Which they didn't actually understand the implications of you're getting $50 and this other athlete is getting 5 million. So it was understanding the language of the release. It was like, oh, if you opt in, you will retain your Title IX rights. But in like very fine print articulating, it was like, but you actually waive all your Title IX rights as it pertains to the distribution of the funds, which is essentially what the Title IX issue is. So
Exactly. Okay, well, let's bring some other people in here. Gracelyn, welcome from Liberty. For those of you who don't know, Gracelyn objected on her own from high school as a high school senior, and has been so impressive. She has presented herself in court not once but twice now. I had the privilege of appearing with Gracelyn both times independently. And Gracelyn, we are incredibly proud of everything you're doing, and your voice we know is super important. So why don't you give us a little background in terms of how you ended up coming into this process?
Yeah. Thank you, Leigh, and thank you to the Drake Group for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I was looking at schools my senior year of high school, junior year. I was offered a roster spot, and then the House settlement got the like initial approval, and my coach called me and said, "Hey, we have to cut our team basically in half. So I don't know if I have a spot for you for the fall." And so at that point, like I didn't know a lot about the house settlement. Obviously, there was very little out about it, right? Like I couldn't find anything about it. I was a high school senior, like everyone else is making their commitments, and I'm like, okay, what is going on here? So I listened to a podcast, and on the podcast, they're like, hey, you can object. And I was like, well, like I'm a person that wants to do something if I can. So I was like, sure, I'll object. I really didn't think anything was gonna happen with it. Like no plans. So I wrote my letter. At the end of it, one of the people that was helping me, one of the ladies that was helping me, she was like, "Oh, hey, like put at the end of it, that you would, like put, I would be happy to speak in front of Judge Wilkin at the April 6th hearing." And I was like, "Okay, I'll put that in there." Sent it in. Didn't expect anything to happen. Fast forward a few months, I get an email that says I thought it was spam. It was actually summoning me to the April 6th hearing. So that was 3 days before my 18th birthday. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. Ended up going out there. Yeah, met a lot of people, met Leigh, met Lexi. Yeah, I got connected. Had to learn what the settlement was to object that on April 6th because I didn't, or April 7th, like I didn't really know. Had to learn what the settlement was and then objected. We obviously got the designated student athlete status added. That was the only plus of the plus of the day. But yeah, we ended up getting the designated student athlete status added, and then I got my spot actually the day that the final approval came out. A few hours before that, my coaches called me and said, "Hey, we have a spot for you." So I was had the blessing of going to Liberty, but I knew that they were going to send me an email or put it in somewhere that I could object again at the final at the fairness hearing. So I got that email and decided to do it again because I saw the carnage that had really happened. Not only like at so many schools, like so many people were being cut, non-revenue sports weren't being taken care of, and it was just like super sad. Like I had to watch time trials happen. I heard about other schools, and it just broke my heart. And I was like, this is still not right. Like just because it got approval doesn't mean it's right. Um, and then we obviously our objections were overruled, decided to appeal, and I'm definitely like obviously I'm appealing and hoping that the appeal goes well and everything, and writing my brief, and doing that all pro se. But obviously we've been knocked down a lot of times. We have been delayed, denied, etc. But I would say that I am going into the future with a hope, with a confident hope, because the reality of this settlement is like I know that I am becoming a stronger person. I know that, I mean, my other panelists can probably confirm this. Like we did not ask to be in the most turbulent time of college athletics. We were put into it, right? We didn't ask to fight and litigate. Like that wasn't our plan coming into college. But this summit has truly made some very strong individuals, some very strong teammates. Like I'm on a team of fighters. I'm on a team that really, really is resilient because of this. And yeah, God has a future for me, whatever that is, whatever outcome that is. Like that's the plan. And yeah, just trusting that and moving forward, like hopeful because I know that like whatever happens, happens. But yeah, we're gonna keep fighting and we're gonna go into this confident.
Great. Well, thanks, Gracelyn. Now, Lexi, I know you've got to run in just a minute. So I thought, given that you were at the hearing, just so everybody knows, the all of the student athletes had the opportunity, in theory, if they properly received the notice, to object on January 31st, 2025. And there were, I think, 73 formal objections. Some of them actually included lots of athletes. Judge Wilkin, I think, asked around 10 of the parties to present. Lexi actually, unfortunately, with her attorney, John Clune, was not included in that short list. I know they wanted to be, but Lexi flew all the way to California and actually was in the courtroom, and that's how we met. But Lexi, why don't you give us a quick update of what you saw when you were in the courtroom last April?
Yeah, I think that it mostly just, I think Judge Wilkin really wanted to confine the case to to an antitrust issue and really did not want to talk about the Title IX issues within the hearing. As I saw it, it was very, I think, dismissed, and her take on it was that it can be raised as a separate issue and really wanted to combine it to an antitrust issue. However, they're entangled in one, and it makes sense to resolve this issue now rather than have this litigation go through years and years and years of more litigation. So.
Okay. Lexi, any other final thoughts before you head to class, or anything else you wanted to convey to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm really appreciative of, everyone that is here. And I think just like listening to student athletes' voice, I think it's really easy to get um to take the student athletes out of it. I mean, now even not being not even an athlete myself and not living it every single day, it's hard to like picture yourself in the shoes of, you know, an athlete that has to wake up and this be there be their reality every single day. So like as this continues on, I think may still make it a personal connection of to like when you were back to an athlete or an athlete that or why you're doing this in the first place and learning about it. But I think just like honestly keeping the conversations open, not being short-sighted, and like understand that like college athletics is special for a reason, and there's a reason that we're fighting to keep it, open to everybody, and it's not something that we should cut off. So.
Great. Well, thanks, Lexi, for joining us. Scott, we're going to bring you into the conversation here. I know that you've got to go to class yourself too in 30 minutes. But Scott, you actually obviously come at this from a male perspective, which I think is incredibly important as well. And you're obviously on an Olympic team, swimming, which for those of you who don't know, Cal Poly cut their men's and women's swimming team last March. For the stated reason, the House settlement. For those of you who don't understand, the economics behind the House settlement is that all of the Division I schools have to contribute to the $2.6 billion of back payments. And then on the injunctive relief, if a school chooses to opt in, then that school would also be contributing out of their budgets to pay the student athletes directly. And so at Cal Poly, unfortunately, for what the school characterizes budgetary reasons, they cut the men's and women's swimming program, and then they opted into the settlement so that they are compensating their football team directly. But Scott, why don't you give us an update of what's going on at Cal Poly and how you got involved here?
Thank you, Leigh, and also thank you to the Drake group. So yeah, last March 7th, it was a Friday morning. We all got an email the night before from our athletic director, called us all in, and so we all met and we were like wondering what's going on, what's going to happen. And some of us had the idea that our team's about to get cut. And so we held our heads high when we walked into that meeting. But in that meeting, our athletic director, he called us in and told us, sorry guys, you guys are cut. After we had one of our best seasons ever in Cal Poly history, we went undefeated in our dual meets, placed third for the men's program at conference, and so many of us had best times and like record-breaking times for the school. And two of our swimmers almost like were right on the cusp of making it to the NC2A tournament. And for our athletic director to just come in and be like, that's it. It felt like the rug was just pulled right under us. Like it was the worst thing that could probably happen to us. And in that meeting, all of us were like asking questions like, what happened? Why didn't they give us a chance to raise money, raise funds, anything? And instead they just went directly for the cutting. And so many of us just distraught after that. And I believe like we got what our budget was for last year. It was only $250,000 for that last year, and $85,000 was raised from the team and parents. And like speaking on like what we accomplished that year, we also had the highest men's team GPA of the entire school as well. So not only were we doing very well as athletes, we were doing well academically, and it just seems like we were the first ones on the chopping block because we were a non-revenue generating sport. So it was just terrible. And I had been swimming 18 years now of my life, and having it just be completely done with, I was distraught. They ended up after that meeting though, they completely cut everything off. Like they said, no more pool time, no more weight room time, like completely cut us off from the Cal Poly sports, like completely. So some of us actually still had meets after our conference meet and after that meeting on March 7th. And we were all like, hey, we need pool times. Like we have meets to go to, we have things coming up. And so after, I believe like a week and a half or so, they finally gave it back to us. But it was like, it felt very hesitant from them to even give it to us. And it was I'm trying to find the words for this. And they gave us our captains had a meeting with the president after that, and we were told to raise, at first it was $25 million, and then for that $25 million to be used to accrue interest to pay for our yearly budget for the team. And like if the math works out, I believe the 25 million would have been around 800,000. So it would have been even more than what we've ever worked with before. So after several meetings with the president, we got it down to 20 million and then got it down again to 15 million. But we had only until June to raise that money. And when the June 15th deadline, I believe it was, came up, we made it to $9 million. And so we came up to the president with that 9 million, and they said it wasn't enough. And that was it. That was all we could have done to try to get the team back.
Yeah, and Scott, I think you highlight how important sports are to all the student athletes, and I think what's happened with you and your teammates exemplifies, how hard it is when you lose a program, and this has been something you've been committed to. Some people would say that we're hearing, class council or NCAA might say, well, we've given you designated student athlete status. You can go transfer. I mean, like, what, how do you think about the possibility of transferring at this point?
So at this point, I do not want to transfer anywhere. But when they first gave us that DSA status back after that meeting, like a bunch of us did enter the transfer portal, but only very few of us, I want to say like 2 or 3, actually did end up transferring. The rest of us like stayed here for their own personal reasons. But for my reasons for staying here, like I wasn't here just for swimming. I was here for my major, which is computer engineering, and that's not offered at very many other schools. And so seeing as this was one of the only colleges that really offered that, I wanted to stay here. And then not only that, it was Cal Poly, and it's such a beautiful campus, and I really could not imagine going anywhere else for school.
Great. And I know your brother had gone there too, so I think there had been a bit of a legacy in terms of you feeling like, understanding what that student athlete experience was going to be like. maybe talk to us too. I know you have a twin sister. For those of you who don't know, Scott has a twin sister who goes and give us a little background of her.
Yeah, so my twin sister, Stephanie, she swims at Harvard and she's currently the women's team captain. And so when like I texted my family group chat all about that, my brother Ryan, who swam here for all 4 years and was captain for his last two, and my sister, who's also swimming, they were like completely baffled by that decision because my sister, like also being in swimming, like she understands like what we have to deal with, what we face, what like the swim like meets, practices, they all come down to, and they were angry at that decision, and so was I.
Yeah. And I know one of the things we talked about is that when I, you had objected, in fairness, you had objected completely on your own. I wasn't working with you at the time. And then afterwards, we discussed about possibly working together, but we talked about the Title IX issue at Cal Poly and, how you might feel about that as a male athlete if for some reason the women's team were to get reinstated prior to the men's team. Any thoughts on that?
Well, if the women's team were to get reinstated, like it would make sense. It's like Cal Poly, after cutting us, they announced two more women's programs being added. So it was women's stunt and then women's flag football for the next year. And so they were trying to fill up the women's programs, like the women's numbers, essentially, because they cut an entire women's program. And swimming is a pretty large team sport. And so if it comes down to like Title IX and the women's team being reinstated, like I hope that would happen because it's like why am I'm running out of words right now.
Oh, it's fine. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but let's jump over to Graceland. Graceland, any thoughts or give us a little bit highlight at what's going on at Liberty, because I know you've got a lot of teammates that unfortunately didn't literally make the cut this year. They have DSA status. What does that mean for the Liberty student athletes?
Yeah, so it's hard because there are designated student athletes at Liberty without spots because the reality is that there was going to be a time trial. And there's going to be 2 spots available at that time trial. So some of the girls did not even opt to run the time trial because they were like, I know where I stand. I'm not going to make it. This is a lot of mental, like, it's a hard mental, like, you know what I mean? Just going into a time trial. A lot of emotional, like, getting tied up in it. So they opted not even to run it. Um, I think there were 5 or 6 girls that opted to run it. They ran it, did not get a cross country roster spot. Obviously 2 did, but then the rest didn't. So they did not have a spot for cross country. As a freshman, I was spared from running that, but I may have to run it in the future. And what this settlement does is you can object your freshman year, but after that, you're not allowed to object again to the settlement terms, which is frustrating because while I may be okay 1 year, what happens down the road, there may be further harm. So it also, like, if you come in as a star freshman, go through the system, get injured, end up having, you're fine your freshman year, you're fine your sophomore year, but junior, senior year, you end up having to run that time trial. You don't even have your rights to object anymore, which is a really hard, it's a hard spot to be in. And I think that, I don't know, like, obviously swim teams are being cut, swimmers are being cut. A lot of our non-revenue generating sports like track, like cross country, like swimming, gymnastics, etc., are seeing so many of these, so many of these issues.
Yep. And stepping back to in terms of the roster cuts, that was really what you had originally objected to. Just to be clear, Graceland is one of 2 athletes who objected originally on January 31st. You had the right to object to the past damages, and you could object to the injunctive relief at that time. Graceland had the foresight to see that she was concerned about the roster cuts, obviously. So, and then she also, as an incoming injunctive relief class member, she's a freshman, she had the ability to object as well on September, I think it was 22nd. So again, that's why Graceland has appeared now twice in the court. But Graceland, talk to us a little bit about, what you were seeing in terms of your concerns with the roster cuts when you originally objected, and then how that changed a little bit with your second objection.
Yeah, so I objected the first time because, right, I go from having a spot and having a verbal 4-year commitment to be able to run, which offers a lot of safety, because you're allowed to develop, you're allowed to struggle, you're allowed to yeah, figure it out. Results aren't forced, right? So then coming into it, it was roster limits, and then I realized as I was objecting to the roster limits that the people that were supposed to be representing me in front of class council were not representing. There was no one that was everyone that was representing athletes were elite. They had concerns, monetary concerns, and they were at the top, they were at the pinnacle of their sport. There was no one in danger of being cut that was a named plaintiff, I guess is the word. The representatives of the class only represented part of the class. They didn't represent the whole class. So there was no one representing. We didn't have a seat at the table when these negotiations were being done. And so we're dealing with the outcomes every single day. Imagine having your program cut. At least I still have a program, right? That's heartbreaking. That's really, really hard. And the reality is we didn't have a spot. We didn't have a seat at the table during those negotiations. We're just forced to deal with them now.
Sure. And I think that Graceland and Scott, there's a bifurcation between, again, when we look at the universe of Division I student athletes, again, we're talking about millions of male and female student athletes. And at one extreme right now, you see some of the top male football players, and I'm sure increasingly as we go down into basketball season, basketball players, but getting millions and millions of dollars. And obviously there's lots of lawsuits right now going on with these elite football players under the premise that, their football program makes money, therefore they deserve to get more money. But one of the concerns is that's the extreme of this. And then we come down to the reality where Graceland and Scott are, and you guys are just hoping to have an opportunity to play sports. You're not asking for millions of dollars. You're just asking for an opportunity to play sports, and you're looking to play sports that are Olympic sports. And, there's a concern that Olympic sports are getting replaced with, with all due respect to the stunt and flag football players out there, these are not traditional championship sports that have been sponsored by the NCAA for decades. These are not sports that you see that the United States has represented for decades and really prides itself on. So maybe just talk to us, Scott, a little bit about kind of, the opportunity to play sports, what that meant to you while you were an athlete, and how that really has changed at this point.
For me, for playing sports, it was something I always wanted to do. My brother Ryan, he swam here, so I was also already swimming, so I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And seeing my sister at the time, as I was getting better and better, and she was talking to so many different schools, I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to swim in college and have a team to be with, and basically have a family almost at this school, because going to college and not having a team, or going to college not knowing anyone can be hard at times. But being able to have this team coming in here, it was just so nice to have, and one of my pillars that helped me stand up on. And then my time here, one of the best times I could have ever had. Practices were hard, that's to be expected. Training was hard, competing with my teammates and all of them, that was always fun. Waking up at 5:20 a.m. to make a 6 a.m. practice was always not the best, but it was fun to get those early morning swims out of the way and be able to just struggle with so many different people that come from so many different backgrounds and are all connected by this one thing. And then losing that essentially was just devastating. We were just collateral damage in this house statement. We were on the chopping block, and they completely threw us away.
Yeah. And are you still on the club team? Remind me, Scott, are you still participating in the club, and what's going on? I hear one of the pools is out of commission at this point, but how is the varsity experience different than the club experience?
So right now, I joined the club last quarter back in September. So I've been swimming with them this whole time, and there's like about 10 of us from the D1 program that joined along with us. And so last quarter we had access to the normal pool for that we were practicing in as like a D1 program. They would give us access to it for the club. But then this past quarter they closed it down and they drained the pool because there's like leaks in it, which I understand. But now that I'm like walking past it every day to go to class, they completely tore up the bottom of the pool. They took out all the tiles. So now some of us are wondering if are they going to fill it in? Are they going to actually repair it? So that's like a question we're thinking about. But compared to swimming in college or on the D1 program versus at the club, it's not as uh, it's not as hard, I guess I'd say. Practices are coached by other students, so we don't have like one singular coach. There's still meets here and there, but it's a lot more spaced out compared to D1. And then like it's just the level of swimming that I've been used to is people who've been swimming for years and years, and then now it's I don't want to sound mean, but it's just not as good.
Yeah. And you don't have, I mean, just to clarify, you don't have access to like the varsity weight room or to locker rooms or, get any equipment. I mean, there's a lot of basic things that these universities provide Division I athletes to help make them elite athletes. And that's one of the big differences between the club and varsity program, right?
Yeah, so basically, like after we were cut, we were given access to it because we were cut in our winter quarter, so we were given access to it until the end of our spring quarter, so the end of my second year here at Cal Poly, and then once we came back, we were basically no longer remembered as student athletes essentially, and so all we were allowed to use is just the rec center now.
Yeah. Graceland, any thoughts right now? Can you talk to us about how challenging it is to object and the time, the time commitment here? And I think one of the big questions that has been brought to people's attention is like, well, why haven't more people objected? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is the emails that we get, yes, we should be checking our email, but they will go to spam. And also, like, a lot of us do use our school email primarily, and the NCAA eligibility centers go to our personal email. So we should be checking our email. But sometimes people don't see the email. That's the first thing. And then the next thing is this is a really hard case to understand. And unless you like literally like my parents have done so much behind the scenes to help me figure out this. It's an enormous undertaking, and it's not an easy process to object. Like you don't just sit down one day and you're like, you know what? I have practice, I have school, I have to get treatment, I have to eat, and I have to study, and I'm gonna object. Like no one does that. So I think the biggest thing is like we don't have time. We're student athletes. Like I have 17 credits right now and I'm in season. Like I am stressed and I objected in high school. Objecting in high school is a whole different, like you're still in your parents' house, you're not making your meals, etc. It's a completely different experience than like being on a college campus and objecting and trying to still understand the case. Another thing I would say is there's very little like when I objected originally, that podcast, and I think there was a Yahoo Sports article out. There was like very little about the settlement and about the issues with the settlement. So it really just wasn't broadcast that much. And then, like Lexi said earlier, athletes knowing that their voice matters and athletes knowing that their voice is their voice needs to be at the table, right? Like our voice, we're the ones that wake up every day and go to practice and do all the things. So I think that that voice needs to have leverage. It needs to have a voice in the game, because we deserve to be at the table when these decisions are being made, because we are, like Scott said, collateral damage. It's going to come down, it's going to affect us. And I think that it's an oversight to expect 18 to 22-year-olds to understand like a class action lawsuit that lawyers that like lawyers like you are working on. Like, we don't have the bandwidth to understand that and understand all the legalities. Like, Rule 23, everyone's talking about it on like the April 7th, and I was like, what is Rule 23? Like, I had no clue. So like I had no, like, how are we supposed to know? How are we supposed to know that like we aren't being represented properly? How are we supposed to know that that we're being harmed? Because we're not told that. Like, obviously our athletic program is not like, hey, you're being harmed by this settlement and you have the potential to be cut. Like, we're not told that. Like, they're like, NCAA is not going to be like, guess what, you're going to get cut. Like, the NCAA is not going to do that. So I think that there's just a lack of like education on it. And there's just, it's a really hard thing to understand. Like, I don't understand it like at all. Like, I mean, it's a very, very challenging.
No, it's for those of you, the docket itself has over 1,000 documents. I can tell you that, like, right now, we've just received 2 briefs back. I think class council submitted a 100-page, the NCAA submitted a 94. I mean, these are really dense documents that would require even an attorney to, and their attorney's team, hundreds of hours to go through, understand the settlement agreement, understand all the definitions, understand the Title IX release, understand how it flows through, understand the economics. So again, Graceland, it's really commendable that you've stepped up and are doing this on your own. And I can't thank you enough, because I think your voice is invaluable, and I think it's radically different than an attorney's. So I know that's one of the reasons why we have you guys here today. Scott, I know you've got to go to class soon, but we have a question for you. It's a long one, but I'll ask that somebody's really interested in terms of your training regimen when you were a varsity athlete, in terms of the in the pool versus the dryland training, in terms of what your hours were.
Yeah, so we average NC2A regulations is 20 hours a week for practices, and that's including both swimming and weightlifting. So for us, we did let's see, last year we did 6:30 to 9:30. No, 6:30 to 8:30. Yeah, 6:30 to 8:30 practices, and every morning, and that was about, I want to say, like between 5 and 8,000 yards depending on the day, if we were doing more sprint, if we were doing more distance. I would always join like the IM sets, the sprint sets. So I didn't really do distance that much. And that was 5 days a week in the morning. And then we had a Saturday morning practice, 8 to 10. And then we did doubles on Tuesday, Thursday. So that means we had an afternoon session from 1 to 3. And then we did weights Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And that was usually an hour, hour and a half.
And then you went to class too, right?
And then I had class in between those times.
And then you studied.
I had 8 a.m.s, so I actually had to go early some days to practice. So that's why I said I had to wake up at like 5:20 a.m. to go swim at 6, because I had to leave early to go to my 8 a.m. class.
Right. And I think balancing the academics and the athletics it's something that makes student athletes really unique, because they learn to juggle that. But the demands are just so high, because you're also putting your body under a lot of stress. And so it needs time to heal and recover. And I know Scott talks about there being a rule of 20 hours of training. And this, to be clear, is for all football players, basketball. But the reality is these top student athletes have to put a lot more time into their athletics, in terms of recovery, in terms of travel, in terms of, call it captain's practices or independent lifts. I think that people underestimate, really, being a student athlete is a full-time student and a full-time athlete while you're trying to be in college. So the demands are really quite phenomenal, which I think gets back to Graceland's point, which is, student athletes really don't have the time, the bandwidth to understand this. Graceland, curious, how many of your, I know your teammates have been really supportive of you. and your coach has been really supportive of you, but how many would you say like actually understand kind of what is going on with this process?
Um, I'm gonna be honest, maybe altogether, if we took all of their knowledges together, maybe one or two.
Yeah.
If we combined all the knowledge. Much of what they know, a few of them did object. Um, they objected with a lawyer. So they did object to this case. But the main part that they understand is the roster limits part. And that's the part that I understood at first too. They did not end up appealing. So I don't know. I talked to them about this because I need to talk to someone about it. So we have conversations like for my November 6th hearing, I would practice it at team dinner. I would practice, and then I'd be like, guys, be as mean as possible. Like, give me all the hard questions. Like, I need to be ready. So they're super supportive. It was super, like, I don't know, it was fun. Like, it gave us something to do at dinner. So I could not do what I do without the support system that I have because this is really hard.
Yeah, and Scott, I think you too have a pretty good support system. I mean, Graceland, you have a great support system in terms of your teammates, and I know your family as well. But Scott, talk a little bit about your support system.
So my support system is my mom has been like one of my rock, essentially. She has been the one helping me so much with figuring out like what objections do I write, or like what do I write in my objection, what do I write in my brief, what do I do essentially. And then not only that, but like past teammates, one of them who's is represented by you, Leigh, Abby Light. She was a diver here, and like her and I, we talk together, and we're always asking each other questions like, what's like, what do we need to do, what's happening. Both of us actually met with our head of alumni because there's still efforts for raising money and raising funds, but now it's like instead of trying to get the team back next year, they're talking about doing like a 3-year plan, so by then I'm already gone. And it's also like former teammates from D1. They're like the ones that are still practicing, they're still training, still swimming, and they're always I'm always talking to them, they're always talking to me, and we're always mentioning how like if we got the team back, like we need to start staying in shape, all of that.
Yeah. And Scott, I know you've got a jump, but any final thoughts for us? I mean, do you have any thoughts in terms of concerns about Olympic sports itself and it kind of, how these might be, in a difficult predicament going forward? Any anecdotes going on out in California? I know swimming's huge out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, recently CBU's team actually just cut their men's swim and dive program, so it's just like the non revenue generating Olympic sports need to be protected because they're the first ones to go essentially because they're just an easy target, even though they have so many good. We're trying to think. Sorry. They have so many bonuses to them, and so many of them lead to like Olympic members, people who are training here to try to swim for other countries. And then like schools, they don't have to sacrifice their own Olympic sports to survive because of this the House settlement. But like if it doesn't change, is like they're going to be the first ones gone. And I'm here because I want college sports college Olympic sports to be protected and to be able to like not get eliminated.
Yeah, no, and I think that's super important. I think one of the big, I'll call it false narratives, is that people talk about a revenue generating sport versus non-revenue generating sports. And I think most people don't realize that very, very few universities, I think there's about 320 Division I programs out there. I think less than 10 of them actually make money. Okay. Lots of things make revenues, but when you watch these football games and the amount of equipment and all their facilities and the travel, I mean, in terms of making revenues less the expenses actually make a profit, most of these schools really do not make revenue. And so this bifurcation between a revenue generating sport and a non-revenue generating sport this, at least in my opinion, is more a result of the structuring of the contracts, because the media contracts themselves have been structured to monetize on football and basketball. But a fun fact, they actually require the NIL rights of all of the student athletes at these universities. They actually bundle those rights together. So, for example, if you go to ESPN, you're going to see women's basketball, you're going to see lacrosse, you're going to see volleyball, you're going to see other sports. And those other sports are getting classified as non-revenue generating sports. But I think the reality is, like I said, these programs aren't per se making money off the sports to really cover their expenses. And then you layer that into this is at not-for-profit educational institutions. Scott and Graceland and Lexi was with us before. These are student athletes. And one of the differences between being a professional athlete and an intercollegiate athlete is that the intercollegiate athlete is doing this in the context of a university. And these universities, they receive federal funds. And as a condition of receiving federal funds, they must comply with civil rights laws. And that's where Title IX comes in, just like Title VI would come in. And so, one of the issues here is this bifurcation, again, between treating revenue generating sports differently than quote unquote non-revenue generating sports. This is really just kind of a bifurcation that I think, unfortunately, more is in line to accommodate the revenue generating machine behind intercollegiate athletics. And, at the heart of it, what we can see today is that it's really the student athletes. Without the student athletes, their athletic services, their name, image, and likeness rights, there is no product for these universities to sell. And forget about the product. As we've learned here, Scott he's a great person, and his teammates are great people, and their experiences as being student athletes is invaluable. So I think that's where this class action has really kind of lost sight of the value of the student athlete here. Scott, before you leave, any final thoughts that you'd like people to share?
I just want to say thank you, Leigh. Thank you to the Drake Group, and thank you everyone for listening and standing up for the student athletes who deserve it.
Okay. Scott, have fun at your engineering lab. I'm sure I would not be qualified to be in there, but we wish you all the best, and thank you so much. It's an opportunity. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Graceland is still here. We're getting some questions. Grayson, while we transition over, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what it felt like? You were like, you and I were on a Zoom call like this in November, and it was scary. I mean, we were going against the top NCAA attorney who's outstanding, Rakesh, and then class counsel, Steve Berman and Jeffrey Kessler, who are regarded as like the #1 sports lawyer in the world right now. Talk to us about what that felt like for you. You're on mute.
Sorry, I actually my level of understanding of this is actually pretty funny, because I found out probably like a month ago that it says CAND on some of these court documents, and I didn't realize that stood for the California Northern District until like a month ago. So my level of understanding is so limited, and it's literally like it is an act of God that I am in the position I am in, because I am nowhere near qualified. But he has continued to put the resources, the connections, the help. He's multiplied my time. He's given me the opportunity. He's given me parents that are willing to work far into the night on this. But it was one of the most intimidating experiences I had. I actually think that it was more intimidating to be over Zoom than it was to be in the courtroom, because in the courtroom you're just facing the judge, but you can see everyone on the screen during the Zoom meeting. And that was it was very, I was definitely shaking. But it was, I don't know, it does grow you. it does make you more resilient. It makes you tougher, right? But it was definitely like a challenge, and it was also like, yeah, how do I share my story in a way that communicates what's going on, what's the heartbeat of college athletics, what is going on the ground, and yeah, how is that going to have downstream effects, and how is the collateral damage, how can that be mitigated, and how can that be stopped?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought it was harder in person. I thought it was harder in person going in front of the judge versus Zoom. But you know that it's interesting that you had a different take on that. We've got some questions here, Graceland. So if you can stick with us, can you stick with us for a couple more minutes? I know you've got a super busy schedule as well, as we know. One of the questions we have is whether when the sports are cut, are the student athletes able to maintain their scholarships? I know the answer to that, but Graceland, I don't know if you want to take a crack at that. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer that for us.
Yeah, so if they're athletic scholarships, they're supposed to be kept, right? That's no scholarships are supposed to be lost, even if you're cut. I personally have no, like, I haven't, there's no one at Liberty that's like, oh, like I lost my scholarship. Like that's not happening. Um, but I'm not gonna say it's not happening at other schools because I'm sure there it probably is. I don't know, Leigh, if you know.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because one of my other male clients, who's not with us today, his name is Reed Hines McDonald. Reed was actually a Division I male student athlete on the lacrosse team at Long Island University, and he had a $25,000 four-year scholarship. And when the roster cuts impacted men's lacrosse, he was on a team that had 51 roster spots, and then I think the roster cut number came down to 48. So I know Reed and some of his teammates were really pressured all last year to enter the transfer portal prematurely. He did not enter the transfer portal prematurely because he was concerned that if he entered the transfer portal, that he would get pushed off the team, and he did not want to lose his scholarship. So technically, the settlement agreement is, in theory, supposed to protect student athletes' scholarships if they were cut from a team. But I can tell you for Reed, he unfortunately was pushed off the team basically the day after his previous university opted into the house settlement. And, you know, they told him it was a roster cut issue. He lost his $25,000 scholarship. He did enter the transfer portal. He is at another Division I program. He does not have an athletic scholarship there. But, you know, I would say that there unfortunately are a lot of games being played by the universities with these student athletes, you know, not only their opportunity to play sports, but also the financials behind it. And so I can say that Reed, he objected on his own completely. And, you know, again, we met after the hearing, and he felt strongly that he wanted to step up on behalf of all of the student athletes out there who are being pressured to enter a transfer portal because you're going to get kicked off the team. I mean, that's not fun for anybody. And in Reed's case, he strongly believes that a large reason why he was cut from the team was because he had a $25,000 scholarship, and the university could save $25,000, which they could then reallocate over to the football program since they had opted into the settlement itself. So it's an unfortunate situation, and I wish I could say that it's not happening elsewhere, but I think there are a lot of games being played, and you know, I think one of the reasons why it's so important that we have the student athletes and their voice is so that we learn about these. Somebody's got here a question about the timing of appeals. So I think this is an important question. Again, there are two separate appeal processes going on, and Graceland is really unique. She falls into both of them. Again, the first, I'll call it House 1. House 1 was, again, the student athletes who objected by the January 31st, 2025 deadline. They could object to the past damages and or the injunctive relief. The overwhelming majority of athletes who objected were based on past damages. largely saying, hey, the amount of money that I'm being offered is not commensurate with what my athletic services and NIL rights are worth. So there was that large constituency of people. Then you saw the female athletes that myself and John Clune, and I know Steve Molo, his firm was representing some of those women as well. They were arguing that Title IX should have applied and that the entire settlement failed to properly value the entire subclass of women. So the timing on House 1 was we had opening briefs that were due on, I think it was, everything gets pushed back 30 days, but they were due, I think, October 29th. So there's 6 appellants. And so they all filed opening briefs. And then the NCAA and Power 5 conferences, those are the defendants here. They had a reply brief, which they filed on December 29th. Similarly, class counsel, who again is represented by 2 outstanding attorneys, Steve Berman and Jeffrey Kessler, they also had a reply brief that came in on December 29th. So you can see everybody works over the holidays, despite these deadlines. When you have court deadlines with the Ninth Circuit, you make those dates. And so now we have a reply brief that I know I'm working on with my team that is due February 18th. So for House 1, you're going to see a bunch of reply briefs come in on February 18th. After those come in, then all of the briefing for House 1 is done. But then we jump to the second set of objections and appeals now, where Graceland, again, she filed a separate objection to the September 22nd to the injunctive relief. So Graceland said, hey, these roster cuts are harming me and my teammates. And, that was, the short answer in terms of why you were objecting. That opening brief is they just consolidated all of those appeals. And so we now have an opening deadline. I think it's March 8th or 9th. I'd have to check on that. But again, we have 2 concurrent processes here with appeals to the Ninth Circuit. And so it's an exciting time for all of college athletes. Let's see what else we've got here. Okay, we've got a question about reforming the EADA reporting requirements to mandate transparency on how institutions are providing athlete revenue sharing payments to college athletes. So basically the question is, again, Lexi talked about this at the beginning. The EADA, that's the Equity in Athletics Disclosure Act. That was, I think, enacted in 1996. And the idea is that the universities need to disclose basically their financials for how they're spending money on their athletic programs. And again, as Lexi explained, this is one of the ways that you can get some visibility in terms of whether a university is or is not in compliance with Title IX. So I think the issue that now is really front and center is, are these $20.5 million revenue sharing payments getting paid directly from the universities to these student athletes? Are these being disclosed? And the answer to that right now is no, they're not. It's something, I think transparency has been a huge issue in this case. And I think that, I think it's incredibly important that, again, as federal recipients of federal aid, that the universities be required to disclose how they are allocating out the money to the student athletes. I think that would be consistent with the EADA. It seems to me like that would be a logical extension of it. And I think one of which, if the universities really feel strongly that they're not violating Title IX, then I don't think they should be concerned about showing us these numbers. But, most of them aren't. And, even for the programs that have opted in, very few of them are really giving you visibility in terms of what percentage of that money is going to male athletes versus female athletes. In general, what you're going to find is you're going to find that there is a 75% allocation to men's football, a 15% allocation to men's basketball, a 5% allocation to women's basketball, and then a 5% allocation to what's called additional sports. And that's literally all the other sports. And so when you look at the past damages, and we talk about how all these additional sports are getting paid so little and why the women are getting paid so little, it's because this settlement on the past damages only allocated out 5% to all other sports outside of football and basketball. And even for basketball, you can see the men's basketball is basically making 3 times what the women's basketball is making, even though we all know that women's basketball in college sports is a big deal right now. And, Juju and Paige Bucher and Caitlin Clark, I mean, we have lots of women who are making millions of dollars. So we know that they're valuable. We know that people are more than willing to pay for their name, image, and likeness. But that's the allocation in terms of how the money is breaking down. Let's see. Where are the deep pocket alumni when schools start cutting sports to plug budget holes? Student athletes like Scott did everything right, and they are the ones paying the price. So the question is, why aren't the donors coming in and solving the problem? So in many instances, these schools really are tapping into the donors and extremely at a really high level right now. So for example, if you look at Texas Tech, and Cody Campbell is a billionaire, and I know that he's been really helping to fund that program. There are a lot of big donors that are getting behind some of these programs. And it's the way that this new college landscape is starting to fund this, the male sports going forward. I think there are a lot of issues with it. Is this money going through the universities? Are these tax write-offs? Is the money getting allocated out to the student athletes directly from the university, or is it being subsidized, through additional kind of third-party NIL deals? There's a lot of issues going on there. But Grayson, talk to us a little bit about, obviously, what's going on at Liberty, and do you see any differences high level between your football program, your baseball? I know you guys have a really good baseball program, right? Am I missing? Yeah.
Softball, yeah.
And softball too?
Yeah, our softball team is really good. I would say that we're not, right? We're not like in the SEC or the ACC. So it's not as blatant. Like our track team is extremely blessed. Like we have a state-of-the-art indoor track. We have a state-of-the-art outdoor track. We have so many resources really because of the legacy and the success that the program has had in the past. So it's not blatant, but I will say that you can see it I think you can see it in so many other programs. Like I see it like, why do the football team, like everyone knows that the football team is going to get better stuff than, and I'm not talking about Liberty, I'm talking about every school. Like the reality is that revenue generating sports are treated a lot different than non-revenue generating sports. Our Olympic sports are not given, like, why are we not investing more into our Olympic sports? Because I mean, we're in an Olympic year right now. Like our teams fuel how we do at the Olympics. And the United States is so good at the Olympics because of our collegiate athletic programs. And then on a non-sports side, 90% of C-suite positions are held by college athletes, or female college athletes. So there's so many C-suite positions. Like this is developing leaders. This is developing character. This is developing community. Like I have the best community I've ever had here right now. And so that's like something that you're not going to get outside of a college athletic program. Like it's a special like greenhouse. Like it just grows you so much. And I don't know, like why are we not spreading that out across everyone? Like why can't we invest in every sport because you don't know who's going to be the next Olympian. And you want the next Olympian to look back and say, hey, I was really supported and like I was developed and I had the resources I needed. And we don't want to be looking back in 100 years and being like, oh my goodness, why did we not give women's basketball anything? And like women's basketball, like, I mean, in 100 years, 100%, it could be at the same level as the NBA finals, right? Like the WNBA finals and the NBA finals could be at the same level. And we're going to look back and we're going to be like, why was so much money given to the men's programs and not the female programs? So I think that like, I mean, we look back and we say, oh my goodness, like females weren't allowed like to run the Boston Marathon. Like that's crazy. Like now every year there's so many that run it. So I think we're going to be looking back in 100 years and saying, why weren't our female college athletes taken care of as much as our male college athletes?
And great, so talk to me. When I was looking at your original objection letter, I think you talked about the importance of student athletes being able to have time to develop. I mean, not everybody comes in is hitting their peak time, but you look at some of the best athletes out there, it's a process. But talk to us about that, your perspective on that.
I think one of my favorite examples of this is Dakota Lindworm. She I don't know what place she got. She ran the U.S. Olympic Trials Marathon. She made it on the team. She was not at a D1 school. She did not go pro out of she didn't go pro out of college. She worked and worked and worked. And then, I don't know, she was like 26, 27, and she makes the Olympic team and absolutely flies. Like she's been like breaking records, like just running so well, like doing things that are absolutely incredible. And she peaked so much later. She didn't peak in college. Like everyone comes from a different college back or high school background. So you may be coming in and you may be coming off of injury. You may be coming in and coming off of like a really hard high school career. And allowing the time to develop is so crucial and having the safety to develop, right? Like I know it's hard for me, like it has been extremely challenging to not like to realize like, hey, I don't know if I have a spot next year. Like I don't. And to race in a way that's free and that's like not wrapped up in like next year, but wrapped up in right now and not trying to prove myself. Like before this settlement, I had 4 years and the coach was committed to standing behind me no matter what happened in the next 4 years. And now I'm in a spot where like the coach is still behind me 100%, but I don't know if I have 4 years to develop. Like whether we like it or not, it's forcing instantaneous results. And that is so, so hard to reconcile and deal with when you're dealing with so much. Like you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we're 18 to 22 years old. Like stuff happens. Like it's hard. Like how can you expect a college athlete to be able to perform at this high level 24/7 because that's not going to happen. So we're going to lose a lot of our developmental athletes that just need an extra year, like a little bit more of a secure environment to develop because the reality is that we're forcing instantaneous results. We're forcing immediate and we're not allowing like longevity and like we're not focused. We can't, how can you be focused on longevity in a process that forces instantaneous results? So I know that that's something that I have struggled with literally day in, day out. So hard. Like, how can you not think about, like, I think about it every day, like how, like, it would be so hard if I didn't have a team next year. Like, that would be so hard. Because you have community, you have resources, you have tutors, you have meal. Like, there's so much that's wrapped up in being a college athlete. And yeah, like just it's been so hard to be in the moment and trust that the future that God has for me is the perfect future.
Yeah, no, I think you say it so well. I think we've got one quick question here. We've got a bunch of questions, Graceland. And thank you for being so honest about what this feels like. And I mean, let's talk about injuries. One of the hardest things are athletes get injured all the time, and there's like no margin of error right now under roster cuts. If you get injured, I mean, understandably, the coach is unfortunately not unfortunately not going to be able to put you on a roster. Any thoughts on that, Graceland?
Yeah, so red shirts count toward the roster. So you can have an injury and be redshirted, but you still count toward the total roster number. So that's just hard because there's a lack of room like for injury, especially if you're not like top 3 on the team, top 5 on the team, etc. I think that something that's been hard is that institutions don't really like they're not like trying to cut their athletes, but institutions like they're like, oh, like the institutions like class council all along has said institutions are the ones that are making these decisions. It's not because of the settlement. But the reality is the settlement forces the institutions to make these like hard decisions that make them cut their injured athletes or that like they literally are pigeonholed into this like, well, we have to be Title IX compliant and we have to have the correct roster number. So like it forces them into this hole of like that comes from the settlement. Like pre-settlement, this never happened, but we're in the settlement era now and this is happening.
Yeah. And Grayson, I know you actually went down to DC last week. I know coming out of it, you felt like it was really important that student athletes have a stronger voice. I know we only have like a minute or two, but anything else in terms of final closing thoughts that you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, please give athletes a voice at the table. If you give athletes a voice at the table and you make it safe for them to be there, if you don't like if they have programs behind them that support them fully, and that support the athlete voice, like that's the reality of what athletes want. Like we are already busy enough, but if we could just be listened to and if we could just be heard and if our voice would have leverage at the table and yeah, that we would still be allowed to develop, that we would still be allowed to get the educational benefit of sport, if we would still be allowed to do what we were expecting, what we were promised, and if it will be protected for our siblings, our families, our friends. Like this isn't an issue that ends now. This is an issue that's going to last for a while, and when I'm older, I want to be able to watch the college sports that I played, right? I want to be able to watch the college sports that everyone loves. I don't want it to just be, I don't want it to be, you know what I mean? I want it to still be like college sports and not professional. Um, so that's what I would say. And then I would say that, yeah, I could not have done like, thank you for having me on. I could not have done this without Jesus literally carrying me through the last year. I think it was 356 days since I objected the first time. So just an incredible last year. I cannot believe the journey I've been on. So thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Graceland just really just truly remarkable. And I think right there you exemplify why it's so valuable that you have chosen to go down the path of representing yourself. And it's one of which I fully support. And I'm very appreciative for you to be in this process as well. So with that, I know we have some questions, but we're coming up on the 3 hour and 3:30 mark, and Graceland has been kind enough to give us her time. And I want to thank the other panelists who obviously are already back in class. And I want to also thank the Drake group for having us again today. And with that, thank you to everybody and continue to follow the case, and we'll continue to give you guys updates.